Morning, wonderful class. How are you guys doing? Look, we're going to use a little different format now. If you notice, we got these buttons that are on the bottom of your keyboard, the same as on the screen. And for when you're watching the video presentation, the lesson, actually, you can go back and look at it, the previous screen by hitting the back arrow key, and you can go forward a screen by hitting the forward arrow key. You'll see in a minute why that's important for you to know about. Just remember back or forward. Let's get on with our lesson, okay? Go to the next screen here. We're going to talk about the Bill of Rights, and this is one of the most important lessons that you're going to get in this course. We're going to talk about, first of all, the first 4 amendments to the Constitution, which is the first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. We're going to cover the first 4. So if you look at the screen here, this is the Constitution of the United States. And it has 7 articles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are the articles of the Constitution of the United States. After they wrote the Constitution, they found they needed to reform it. So what happened was when Benjamin Franklin and Madison went out to try to sell the new Constitution to the people in the colonies, a lot of people didn't want the new Constitution. They said, no, this is just another dictatorship. They said, there's no protection for our freedoms. So Madison and Franklin and the other Federalists, they said, okay, look, you pass the Constitution, just put it into effect, and we'll put 10 amendments in it, 10 amendments here, and we'll call those amendments the Bill of Rights. And there we'll outline and guarantee your freedom with the Bill of Rights. And so the people in the 13 colonies said, okay, they passed the Constitution, got 9 states to okay it, and the Constitution became the law of the land. Since that time, we've had amendments from 11 to 27. We'll cover those in a different section. Today, we're only going to cover the first 4 here, the first 4. So let's get started, okay? First of all, I'm going to give you a little test question. This is why the arrow keys are important. Look, you got the test on the screen here. So which of the constitutional articles explain the president? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? And here you get the answers right over here. Go back the screen, look over here, and you go here. So which of the articles explain the president? Which one of these articles are about the president? 2, it's the executive branch, that's the president. Which constitutional article explains the court system? And you have to find the answer right here. Which of the constitutional articles explain the Congress? And you'll find the answer right here. That's why you get this arrow key to go back and forth. Now let's talk about how they changed the Constitution. There's a process for changing the Constitution. We don't believe in the United States that presidents, and although some of them recent times they think that they can do this, you can't change the Constitution. You have to go through a certain process to change the Constitution. And this is the formal process for changing the Constitution. First of all, the first thing you have to do is propose a change. Somebody has to say, well, how are we going to change the Constitution? Well, this is how we're going to propose a change to the Constitution. And then after you propose a change, then you have to ratify it. So it takes 2/3 of both houses of Congress to propose a change to the Constitution. So somebody could get up in the House of Representatives and say, I want to change the Constitution and legalize marijuana. Well, okay, then it has to go. The Senate also has to pass it by 2/3. If both the House and the Senate pass it by 2/3, then it goes out to the states to get ratified. And then it takes 3/4 of the states to approve it or ratify. Ratify is the same. Ratify means propose. Ratify means to approve, rather. So it takes 3/4 of states to approve it. Now, another way they could change the Constitution is by calling a convention, having 2/3 of the states in a convention, and then 3/4 of the states in a convention. But they're not likely to do that. They're probably going to go through Congress if they ever change the Constitution again. So how many House and Senate members must vote to change the Constitution? This is on the final exam, this question. How many states must vote to change the Constitution? And so you got it right there. There's the answer. To find the answers, you simply go back and look at the screen, and then go forward and look at the test question. Let's go to the next step. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. Here they are. They cover everything. They protect everything the Bill of Rights does. Your freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, your right to own a gun, no quartering soldiers, searches and seizures, persecution, fair and speedy trial, jury trials, no cruel and unusual punishment. All these things are part of your amendments, or it's also called the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. So the Bill of Rights has certain things called natural rights. Natural rights. What is a natural right? Natural is the key word here, natural. What is a natural right? The Founding Fathers recognized that the greatest threat to individual freedom is the government. Governments are evil, guys. I mean, think of all the people in the world that have had to suffer throughout history. Who does all the persecuting of people? Okay, it's not your next door neighbor, it's the government. The governments are the ones that do this. Communist China, Russia, Nazi Germany, all these countries that persecute their people, those are called, that's what's your threat to your freedom. So the founding fathers recognized that the greatest threat to individual freedom was the government. You were born with natural rights, natural rights. These rights do not come from the government. You're born with them. You have a right to life, you have a right to liberty and property. Now, Thomas Jefferson, when he was writing the Declaration of Independence, he changed it from property to pursuit of happiness because not everybody owned property at the time, and he wanted it to be more inclusive. Remember that natural rights do not come from the government. Now, what's our little quiz for here? What are natural rights? So there's the test question. Now, what you need to be doing here is making it a piece of paper and write down the answers to these questions. Put 6 is A, B, C, D, or whatever it happens to be. And then when you go to take the actual test, you can use your notes to take the test. Just fill in the answers. But these are the questions, the actual questions on the test, and you're getting them ahead of time. We'll have a very famous American, Marco Rubio, is a guy that I kind of like, maybe because his father was a bartender. He's an immigrant. His parents were immigrants coming to America. He's Latino, and he comes from Cuba. And he says, Americans choose a limited government that exists to protect their rights, not to grant them. You're there to protect your rights, to protect them, not to grant them. The government doesn't give you your rights. Your rights are, the government's only there to protect your rights. And Senator Rubio is correct about that. So what does the Bill of Rights apply? Who do they apply to? Well, originally the Bill of Rights only applied to laws passed by the United States government. It had to be the U.S. government. That's the only ones that were the laws that he applied to. So they could say you have freedom of the press, freedom of religion. That only applied to the U.S. government. It did not apply to the states. The states could have their own religion. The states could limit your free speech if they wanted to. In the beginning, the Bill of Rights only applied to the U.S. government laws. So Congress couldn't pass a law taking away your freedom of speech. It did not apply to laws passed by individual states. But after the 14th Amendment, the Bill of Rights then applied to individual states as well. We're going to study the 14th Amendment. It's one of the most important amendments in a later lesson. But the 14th Amendment made the Bill of Rights apply to the states as well as to the U.S. government. Well, the Bill of Rights are designed to limit the power of who? The states, the people, the government, or the Constitution. The Bill of Rights are limitations on the power of the government. It says, this is how it's worded. The government will make no law establishing a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It says the government will make no law. It's not a restriction on the people. It's not giving you your rights. It's only a restriction on the government, telling the government to get out of your face and let you alone and let you be free. That's what the Bill of Rights is all about. It's an anti-government piece of law, part of our Constitution. Remember that the First Amendment has 4 freedoms: religion, speech, press, and assembly. It's not four separate amendments. It's one amendment that contains these 4 freedoms. The first one is freedom of religion, and that's what we're going to cover now. So freedom of religion is the First Amendment. Part of the freedom of religion is part of the First Amendment. Freedom of religion has 2 parts to it. First, it has the Establishment Clause. The Establishment Clause means that the U.S. government cannot establish one church for the country. We do not have an official church in the United States. England has the Church of England. Many other countries have the Catholic Church. Israel has Judaism. And certainly the Middle East countries, they all have Islam as their official religion. The United States does not have an official religion. The Founding Fathers did not want the church and the state to be combined into one. They saw all the terrible things that having the church and the state together, what kind of problems that caused for people throughout history. And they did not want to make that mistake again. They said, you can have freedom of religion, but it's got to be separate from the government. And so the second part of it is free exercise clause. Not only do you not have an official government, but you have a right to practice your religion any way that you want to. Let's talk about the Establishment Clause again. Like, for example, I'm a teacher. I could not come into the classroom with a shirt on the T-shirt that said Jesus saves. Why? Because I work for the government. And it would be a way that the government was of pushing religion on people. It was a way of using the government to push a certain religion, and we don't want to do that. So that's why we couldn't put the 10 Commandments on the board. And so you can't do things like that. The Free Exercise Clause says you can practice your religion any way you want to. There even comes to like certain Native American tribes that use drugs in their ceremonies, and they were using drugs, and one of the states put them under arrest. They tried to arrest these guys who are using drugs. Well, the Supreme Court got involved in the case, and the Supreme Court said, wait a minute, they've been using peyote for hundreds or thousands of years, so we're not going to interfere with it. It's a part of their official religion, and so they have the free exercise clause protects them. Also, there's actually one religion in the United States that sacrifices animals. Mostly they do chickens, but they sacrifice animals. And the Supreme Court has said they have a right to do that as well. The states cannot come in and keep them from doing that. So freedom of religion guarantees that you cannot have an official church, and that you have a free exercise. You can practice your religion any way you want to. You can be in your classroom, put your head down on the desk and say, I'm praying, and nobody can stop you. Got it? That's freedom of religion. So, the official religion of the United States that's question 8. Question 9, countries such as Iran, where the state and the church are merged into one, are called theocracies. If you break a law in Iran, you're also committing a sin against God. So why did the founding fathers believe that the church and the state should just be separate? In Iran, they have people that go around, and if you're not dressed, if you're dressed immodestly, if you're a girl, you're showing too much skin. They have these guys called the morality police, and they run around, they get whips, and they beat these girls and put them in jail and then punish them because they're not dressed right, because they have the force of law, because you're breaking a law, but you're also breaking God's law, so they feel justified in doing that. In some of the smaller towns, not in the big cities in Iran, but in the smaller towns, if you're gay, you're likely to be put in the center of the town and everybody stone you to death or throw you from the top of buildings, because obviously in the Quran says that being gay is against God's law. So you don't want the church and the state to be using the same laws. You don't want that to be. You want them to be separate. Then you'll have freedom of religion. Then you'll have a free government as well. You don't want them mixed together. Let's talk about the second one, which is freedom of speech. More properly, it should be called freedom of thought or freedom of expression. So when you speak words, you're really expressing what you're thinking. You're telling us what you think. And freedom of expression and freedom of thought are part of freedom of speech. Now, the First Amendment, freedom of speech, is really probably one of the most important amendments that we have. You have a right to express your opinions. You have a right to do that. This right is not absolute, though. For example, you can't slander somebody. I couldn't go and say, oh, I saw him stealing from the 7-Eleven, even though it wasn't true. I couldn't do that just to discredit you. You could take me to court and sue me, because you can't slander someone. Also, you can't endanger someone's safety. You can't go in the gym when they're having an assembly and say, fire, and have everybody trample out of the assembly and get trampled to death. You can't do that either. Also, it's against the law to threaten the life of the president. It's against the law to threaten the life of a teacher. You really cannot threaten a teacher. One time I was teaching seriously emotionally disturbed kids, and one of my kids that was really disturbed, he said, Schneeman, I'm going to kick your ass. Excuse my using that curse word. And a policeman overheard him. He was on the school bus. And the cop went on the bus and dragged the guy out. I said, officer, no. He has problems. And the officer wouldn't listen to me. He just took the guy off to jail, arrested him right out of the bus. So you can't, there's certain limitations on free speech, but we don't want to put too many limitations on it. You want to be able to express your thoughts, because it's a very sacrosanct, in my opinion, one of the most important of all the amendments. I just saw a word that I misspelled. So speech includes any form of self-expression. For example, music is considered free speech. So if you have a music and your lyrics, sometimes people don't agree with the lyrics they hear, especially in rap, but there's nothing you can do about that, because that's a person expressing their personal opinions, and you have a right to do that. You have a right to do it through art. Many times people object to certain kinds of art, but you have a right to do that also. That's your freedom of speech. Any kind of a hobby that you have is also a form of free speech. Even being an alcoholic, you have a right to be an alcoholic. If you want to be an alcoholic, you can be an alcoholic. It's not against the law. You have a right to express yourself. It even counts for people like Colin Kaepernick. A lot of people, they get angry with Colin Kaepernick. I was in the Korean War, and I have an uncle, my Uncle Joe, who died fighting the Nazis in World War II. And so when Colin Kaepernick kneels down and he won't salute the flag and he disrespects the American flag, it hurts my feelings. It really does. But Colin Kaepernick should not be criticized for doing that. He's simply expressing what he thinks. He's expressing his opinion. Now, I wish I could have Colin Kaepernick for about a week and just talk to him in my class. I think I could convince him to change his mind. I just think he's misinformed. But he should not be criticized for expressing his opinions. He has a right to that opinion, no matter how nasty you might think his opinions are, no matter how hurtful, no matter how disrespectful the American flag. He has a right to free speech and free expression. He has a right to do that. Even people that are in the KKK, they have a right. Nazis have a right to be a Nazi. You can't tell someone not to belong to the KKK. That's their freedom of expression. It's a terrible thing, but they have a right to do that. So anyone has a right to free express their opinions, even when they're opinions that we don't agree with. And so I don't like what Colin Kaepernick does. I don't like what the KKK does, but they have a right to do that because the free speech includes that. Once you start chipping away at this free speech thing, and pretty soon they restrict this and they restrict a little more and restrict a little more. Politicians always love to ante things up, and pretty soon they'll be expressing everything or banning everything. So Antifa, communists, and Nazis generally hate America. Can the government restrict their hate speech in order to protect the state? That's one of the questions. Question 11, a black family moves into a house across the street from the KKK family. Oh, can the KKK family burn a cross on their lawn to express their hatred for black family? Can they? Yes or no? Well, they can. They can burn a cross, even though it's hurtful to the people across the street from them, because they have a right to self-expression. Now, this is actually a court case that happened. And what happened was the fire department came in and said, I know you have a right to burn a cross, but you're violating the fire safety laws. So they arrested him for violating the safety laws. But you do have a right to do that. You can express your opinions, even when they're nasty and things you don't agree with. Let's talk about freedom of the press. The newspapers are important because they keep us informed. It's about the only investigative branch that really keep us informed and let us know when the government's getting out of line. So freedom of the press is an important freedom. So the First Amendment, freedom of the press, it means that the government cannot censure the press. They cannot tell the press what to print, what not to print. The press includes all forms of media, TV, the internet, speech, all of that. It is all included as forms of the press. In the old days, we only had newspapers and magazines. When I was a kid, they had radio, newspapers, and magazines. Now it includes the internet, TV, all kinds of things, social media. Everybody's expressing their opinions in all these different forms, but they're all forms of free press. The right is not absolute. Now, you have a right to express your opinions in writing and in the free press, but the newspapers are not absolute. For example, you can't have any child pornography, and you can't slander someone. So those are limitations on freedom of the press. You just can't publish certain things that are beyond the pale. But freedom of the press is important. We need free newspapers. We need the newspapers to be independent and not committed to either one candidate or one party or the other. They need to be free and open so they can keep an eye on the government and tell us what's going on to protect our freedoms. Unfortunately, some of the press today are just locked into one party or another, and all you get is one side of the story. So why is free press important? Here's your question 12. Question 13, can the school newspaper criticize the government, administrators, and teachers? Yes, they can. So the answer to 13 is yes. That was actually a court case where the kids in the school newspaper had to go in front of the courts, and the federal judges said you can criticize it. School newspaper is just like a regular newspaper. Of course, there are certain other limitations they would put. They're not going to let you put advertisement for marijuana stores. They're not going to let you put that in a school newspaper. But the government, as the school newspapers, can criticize the government. They can criticize their administrators and teachers. The next freedom is freedom of assembly. This is all First Amendment now. This is all part of the First Amendment. The First Amendment means that you have a right. The people can assemble in groups and petition the government. That's what it's for. You can get together and say, I don't like what the government's doing, and you can demonstrate and have a demonstration. Anybody can do that. Even groups like Nazis have a right to demonstrate like that, but people can assemble in groups. There are limitations. For example, you can't form a mob and endanger public safety or threaten people or destroy private property. Some of the stuff we saw going on this summer, I don't know if that was really, nobody has tried to test it yet by going to court, but I doubt that stuff is really freedom of assembly, because they were destroying property and people got killed as well. So you have a right to petition the government, not do that, not do it in the way that you did it, that some people do it the last summer. So a group of young people did not like the law passed by the city council. They demonstrated by looting local businesses, burning cars, and beating people. Which statement below is true? And you have to make a decision on that. That's question 14. All right, now remember that the First Amendment is 4 freedoms: religion, speech, press, and assembly. It's not 4 amendments, 1 amendment, 4 freedoms. So which list below contains the 4 freedoms in the First Amendment? Now, look, all you have to do is look up the answers right there, and the answer's right there, okay? Let's move on to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is the right to own a gun. Now, a lot of times in newspapers and politicians will say, well, what do you need that gun for? You can't use it to go duck hunting. You can't use it for target shooting, so what do you need that kind of a gun for? Ladies and gentlemen, the Founding Fathers did not want you to have the right to own a gun to go duck hunting or target shooting. They wanted you to have a gun to protect yourself from the government. That's why they wanted you to have a gun. That's why people are allowed to have the gun. And any government that tried to take over the United States, they would have a hard time because there's so many guns in the United States, so many people have them. But that's what the Founding Fathers wanted to. Now, there's sometimes limitations have to be put on, especially in modern times. A lot of kids are getting killed with guns, but that's a problem, an issue that we're struggling with. We want to protect your Second Amendment rights, but at the same time, we want to limit the use of guns, and all these kids that are getting killed in the inner cities. It's just terrible. So the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms, or bear arms. That's what owning a gun means. There are city, state, and U.S. laws that attempt to control guns, and they do. Example, you can own a gun, but you might not be able to bring it into certain cities. Like Chicago, believe it or not, how many kids get killed there every weekend? There's 10 or 12 kids get killed by guns in Chicago, but there's a law you're not allowed to have a gun in the city. So the kids and some people ignore the law. Some automatic weapons are also banned. So, why did the Founding Fathers want you to have the right to own a gun? Yeah, that's question 16. Question 17. Generally, conservatives believe you should have a right to own a gun. Liberals would like to confiscate most guns. The NRA is the National Rifle Association. They work to protect people's right to own a gun. Which statement below is true? Usually they push very hard. Anytime the Congress tries to come up with a law to restrict guns, the NRA, National Rifle Association, puts a ton of money in there. They have a lot of money from their members, and they fight against those laws. That's their right to do so. The next amendment is quartering of soldiers. This is the Third Amendment. The British used to have a nasty habit. They invaded Boston, took over Boston, and what they did is they said, okay, they would go into a person's house and say, we're going to put these 5 soldiers in your house. They're going to use your bed, so you guys have to sleep on the floor someplace. I want you to cook their meals and do their laundry for them. They would move the soldiers into foreign soldiers that Boston people didn't like in the first place. They moved them into their house and then told the Boston people in Boston to take care of them. That was called quartering of soldiers. Oh, American colonists hated that. So, which does it suggest that James Madison made quartering of soldiers the Third Amendment? Why did he make it the Third Amendment? What does that suggest? The fact that he made it the Third Amendment to the Constitution. There's only 10. First of all, it's the very third one. There were only 10 that we're working on. It was the third, so it was pretty up there, high in importance. The Fourth Amendment is government searches and seizures. Look, those 2 police officers coming up the door, they knock on the door, can I come in your house? No, you don't have to let them in. You do not have to let the police come into your house. You just say no, they can't come in unless they have a search warrant. And the Fourth Amendment protects you from searches and seizures. So, no unlawful searches and seizures of property or arrests. If the cops are going to come in your house, the police are going to come into your house, they need a search warrant from a judge that says what's to be searched or taken and who is to be arrested and why. They can't just go into your house unless they have a search warrant. And they get the search warrant, a judge has to sign it. A search warrant is important. Now, if you go over here, it's even true in your car. Let's say you're driving a car and the police stop you and they say, can I search your car? If you say no, they can't search your car. They could probably impound your car maybe and take it in and search it later. And there is a little caveat here. Look, if the cops stop you in your car and they smell marijuana and see an open beer container in your car, they see a crime being committed. So then they can search your car. They don't need a warrant. Or if a policeman goes to your door Like one time, one of the football players had a big party at his house in Bonita. It was a wild party. His parents were out of town, and the kids were throwing beer bottles all over the street. It was a mess. The neighbors called the cops. The cops went up the door, knocked on the door, and said, "Can we get in there, please? We want to come in." No. He said, "No, you can't come in." And the police were ready to turn around and walk away, and all of a sudden they looked in there, and they saw kids drinking beer that were obviously underage. Now they see a crime being committed, so then they can go into the house. You know, it's like unreasonable. You say the police knock on your door and they see somebody being murdered. Of course they're going to go in your house. So under those conditions, they can. But most of the time, unless they see a crime being committed, they cannot search your car or search your house without a warrant from a judge. So your sister's boyfriend is a drug dealer. What do the police need to search your house? Okay? Your sister's boyfriend's a drug dealer. The cops want to search your house. What do they need to search your house? You're stopped by the police and they smell marijuana and an open beer in your cup holder. What do the police need to have there to search your car? Well, I just gave you that answer in the lecture. Thank you for your attention. I think you're a great class. We're going to start with Amendment 5. It will be the next lesson that we go through. But good luck on your quiz. I think you're a great class. I hope you understand the amendments are important to you. Your rights and your civil rights are important. And I hope you'll take it seriously, okay? Thank you for your attention, guys.